Well, Gold Derby fans, I am so excited to sit here with the recently nominated star, as well as creator, writer, showrunner of Razor Tongue, the critically acclaimed web series. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby. With me is Rain Valdez, and congrats on this nomination, Rain. You're up for Best Actress in a short form series, and I'm just curious. What was your reaction when you found out you got this nomination? How did you first hear about it?
I was watching the live nominations. It was Tatiana Maslany, Laverne Cox, who's a friend of mine, and they only announced the big names, which I kind of knew that's what was going to happen. So I was like, that's it. So I started to get ready to walk my dogs. I have two dogs, but I don't know. Something told me I should just. I mean, I'm here. I just watched it. I should just look to see so that I know before I left to walk my dogs. And so I went on my laptop and I found this PDF and I just started scrolling and scrolling. It wasn't until I got to like page 34 where I saw my category, and it was a very surreal, like out of body experience. I saw all the names and they were all like Quibi, and then I saw my name and I was like, oh wait, I know that name. I didn't connect it yet. And then until I saw Razor Tongue and now Ever Productions, that's when I was like, holy shit. And I started shaking. I started crying. I didn't know what to do. I remember asking myself, like, what do I do? So I think I called my manager who didn't pick up and left a very emotional, panicked message, which sounded something like this. I think I'm nominated, which like that was pretty much the gist of it. But yeah, and then I started getting text and phone calls from my friends in the industry who were seeing the same thing I was seeing. So that gave me confirmation that what I was seeing was right. Because when it's just you, it's like, wait, is this real? So that's what it was for me for most of the morning. And then I called and texted a bunch of friends to let them know, particularly Sarah Pointer, who's my best friend, and she directed 2 of the episodes of Razor Tongue. I texted Laverne Cox because I thought it would be fun for her to know. And she was just beyond over the moon excited as I was. So yeah, it was a very, I don't think I'll ever forget that morning.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I ended up not walking my dogs.
Yeah, better, more important things to do than that. Yeah. And you're nominated for your role as Belle on this, but you also have your hands in so many parts of it. You created the series, and so I'm wondering, can you walk us through like what sparked the first inspiration for this show?
Yeah, I had this idea for a character, which was Belle, and that she had this vernacular that was very, empowering and smart and also funny. And then Time's Up happened. This was like a few years ago, and I was working on the show Transparent and kind of caught myself in the whirlwind of everything that was happening. But I started to feel angry at my own complacency in terms of how I've sort of participated in letting microaggressions and misogyny and discrimination happen to me over the years of being in this industry. So I started interrogating that and started getting angry that I didn't value myself enough to like stand up for myself or report an incident. So I just kind of channeled everything into Belle and wrote it in like one weekend. And I kind of took it to my artist collective at the time, Now More Than Ever, and we did like a live reading of the script, and we decided that it would be the first thing that we would try and shoot together as this queer collective.
I'm kind of curious, what is the process like, because you also wrote for this show. What is it like writing for yourself? I'm kind of wondering, is that a really difficult prospect of like, how do I push myself am I going to know how to push myself as an actress, or does it feel really natural to have that dialogue flow out how you're going to say it?
It's a little bit of both. I knew that Belle would be a challenge for me to play because I haven't played anything like her before. But I also knew that she's very, she's like a close friend. Like I know who she is. I know where she comes from. It's not a lot of preparation that I have to do. I just kind of fell into her into her body. So it was so yeah, and I was intimidated also because I wrote it and then I was going to act it as well, and which is such a risk when you put your name in a project and do and wear many hats, right? But you know, we did consider I was like, well, am I playing Belle, or like should we like open up the casting pool? And everyone was like, you're playing Belle, like 100%, because everyone just knew that like there's probably no one else that who can play her, because of how she's written, so personally, you know, close to you know, my experiences.
Yeah. I, I wanted to know about your experiences too, because so much of this is she's this woman who just can eviscerate anyone. She's not holding back at all. And, you know, even the first episode just begins with the most frustrating, obnoxious date I think that's ever been recorded. And how much of that, like, is there dialogue and experiences you directly lift in that are sort of like cathartic for you to get out through Belle?
Yes, yes, absolutely. When I wrote it, I put pretty much everything on the table, and I didn't hold back. And the first episode is based on a real experience with on a date, where I just couldn't get anything out of my mouth for the most part, until the end, and then I finally and then it was one of the incidents where I've actually stood up for myself. So that is definitely based on a real experience. Some of the other scenes I kind of embellished, and what Belle represents for me and for a lot of women is the the idea that we can say something in the moment, because more often than not, we walk out of a room feeling a certain way, and we go into our car or we leave and we think to ourselves, oh my god, I should have said this. And so for me, Belle represents the voice within all of us. All of our Everyone has a razor tongue, and she gets to say, you know, all of those things that we wish we would have had the opportunity to. And so I'm hoping that this empowers women to not wait until they get into the car and drive away, and find it within themselves to just take a moment to breathe and then just get it all out. I think it's so empowering.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there's a shift that happens. You know, we spend 2 episodes with her watching you have these beautiful takedowns of the date and then the potential employer. But then at this party in episode 3, we meet Austin, and you just find him so problematic. Belle just can't stand him, and yet she ends up falling for him. And it's a really fascinating shift to watch in that scene. What do you think it is that makes her kind of maybe look past or ignore these problematic things about him and is able to fall for him?
Yeah, that's another thing that I really liked about the character, is that she's flawed, and she knows he's problematic, but also can be a little bit forgiving because he just doesn't know any better. And so for her, there's enough of an attraction to be a little bit forgiving about who he is, and maybe there's a way to connect and have a relationship that's based on truth as opposed to based on performative behavior. Because a lot of times when we go on dates, we're sort of performing our best because we want to be liked or we want the date to succeed. But with Belle, at that moment at the party, she kind of just like you're an asshole and this is who I am. And still they're sitting there having a conversation and realizing that like, oh, they still sort of like each other, knowing that they're both like horrible people in a way. So for me, that was very fascinating because it in a way there's hope that maybe dates can be a little bit more truthful.
Yeah. And it ends with quite a cliffhanger too, because she gets on this show and the host really puts her in this awkward position and kind of pressures her, antagonizes her into sort of calling him out uh, about being problematic, about being misogynist on live air on a podcast.
Yeah.
So what goes through Belle's head with that? Or is it because she kind of feels like she's questioning what she believed in that moment?
Yeah. I think, you never really know where you stand until you're challenged, until your beliefs are challenged. And so she's at a breaking point where you're either really going to stand up for what you believe in or you're going to be a part of the problem. And so Ariel, who's played by Alexandra Gray, like just sort of deliciously hands that on a platter. And so it's up to Belle to decide who she really is. And it's sort of the idea of like going back to who I used to be and be complacent and ignorant and just live in my privilege because I'm a light-skinned woman of color, or am I going to join forces with the bigger movement,
Yeah.
for women's voices and women of color and women of all kinds. And so for me, it was such a thrilling episode to shoot. And I love seeing the audience when we screen too, because the audience just kind of go quiet whenever that episode, airs at the end. Because it really, I think it's one of those, it's a very relevant issue. Like, are you an ally or are you an accomplice? And so with Belle, she's sort of being put to the test. And I love seeing how, how she's thinking about the whole thing and how she's sort of being put on the spot and trying to figure out like, who she really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many of there are a few exceptions, but a lot of it are these really intense two-person scenes, these back and forths. Was that a conscious decision to create the series almost around those types of interactions?
Yeah, it was. Honestly, because of budgetary reasons, we knew that, prior to being Emmy nominated, no one really knew who I was. And, with a few credits under my belt. So it was hard to like get anyone to fund the project. And so for me, if we were going to make it happen, our cost had to be very minimal in terms of cast and location and length. And so we thought about that prior. And even when I was writing, I knew that this is something that I need to shoot and needs to be out there. So I have to be really smart about how I write it. So yes, it was very, very intentional in that regard. Season 2, which is also written, is completely different. It's like a very traditional show where there's multiple characters and multiple storylines in an episode, and it's longer, it's bigger, the world is bigger. So I'm hoping that we'll get to that point.
Yeah. And the show, your team is very diverse. I think you have 80% of the team is queer or people of color. Was that a decision that you set out to fulfill that from the beginning, or was that just how you surrounded yourself?
Definitely intentional on my part from the beginning, and definitely because I make a point to surround myself with artists within my community. I think community support is very important. And I firmly believe that you move mountains with the people you love. And so that was very much what Razor Tongue is for me, is moving mountains with the people that I love, the people who believe in me. And yeah, I can't wait to do it again. I think it's also one of those things where, for me, because I'm queer and trans and I'm a woman of color, it was the first thing that came into my head. Well, we're going to hire women, we're going to hire trans women, trans people, non-binary people in every department as much as we can. And it wasn't really hard to find them, to be honest. And because of that, I think the project itself is so much more special. Even the music is made by trans people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the really cool things to me about it is that it is a story centered on a trans woman, but that doesn't necessarily, that's not like the defining characteristic or defining story element, which sometimes, we have stories, whether it's a TV show or a play or whatever, that are specifically about LGBTQ issues, and that becomes the center of it. Razor Tongue is just kind of like, I don't think Belle even identifies herself as trans until the final episode. And it's kind of a really nice kind of nonchalant way to bring it up. Was that a purposeful thing for you?
Yes, it was. As an actress and as a performer, I read a lot of scripts. A lot of scripts come to my table, and I do a lot of auditions, and a lot of the roles that I audition for or play are centered around my transness, or the character being trans. And if the writer isn't community based, usually the character is outed in the first 5 minutes of being on screen. And so I kind of just wanted to show what it would be like for a trans character and not let it be about that, because my life as a trans woman isn't always about my transness, and that goes for a lot of my friends in my community, in my industry. And so I thought it would be interesting to just have a trans character be the protagonist, but not let that be the central part of her story, since it's not the central part of any of our stories. It's a part of who we are, and it's part of what makes us unique and different from one another. And so mentioning it at the end, at the last episode, and also allowing her the agency to be the one to disclose and be the one to come out, I think is showing a different kind of narrative. And I think that's what happens when you put trans people in the writer's room. They really take care of their own characters, because we see a lot of ourselves in them. And so for me, it was important to show what it's like to handle a trans character, and still let that be a part of her life, and have the audience know a little bit about her, but not in a plot twisting, sensationalized way, which is, we've seen so much of that already, and has been detrimental and harmful to trans people's existence. So I wanted to show a character who's funny, who can be messy, who can be lovable, and all the things that cis characters get to be. But then we just find out, oh, she happens to be trans.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And before I let you go quickly, you obviously wear many hats in this, as you say, and because I saw in your resume, you frequently work as a director, as an actress, as a producer. You always seem to wear many hats. So what is sort of the most important thing that you get from like creating your own work and working across just different roles like that?
That's a really good question. I think for me is control and decision-making power. And, as an actress, acting is like my first love. I think that's like, if anyone asked me what I want to do, if I only could pick one, I would pick acting for sure. But it comes so few and far between for someone like me, as you know, Filipino American and as a trans woman. So for me, being able to direct and being able to produce and write allows me the freedom to create and to give myself that decision-making power, which I keep hoping Hollywood will give me eventually. And so I just got to a point of, well, I'm not going to wait around, and I'll just start doing it for myself. So, and then I ended up liking it. Like I didn't know I would like directing or producing, but I actually started enjoying it more because of the freedom and the control that you get to have, and to be able to have the agency to tell your own story, which I think is so important for us, for queer artists right now. Our stories for so long has been in the hands of people who aren't in our community, and so now there's a shift, there's been a revolution, and I'm excited that I've been participating in that change moving forward.
Well, the Emmys certainly saw your participation in it, so congratulations on your nomination. Best of luck at the Emmys, and everyone who's out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby and keep in touch with us throughout Emmy season. Thank you so much, Rain.
Thank you so much.